I came to Thornwall Pass expecting silence. That was the pitch, anyway. The Compact Frontier Bureau had a slot open. Human liaison guard. Kethis Treaty Station. Mountain posting. Minimal contact with the local garrison. And my reassignment officer had looked at my file. Looked at the 3 commendations I'd received for frontier service in difficult terrain. Looked at the citation from Velmora, where I'd spent 14 months alone in a forward observation post without resupply, and had said, with what I can only describe as professional relief, "You seem like someone who doesn't need much company." He wasn't wrong. I took the posting. What he had not told me, what the briefing document had described in language so bureaucratic I had read past it twice before it registered, was that the treaty station at Thornwall Pass also housed, under compact diplomatic protection and the terms of the Kethis Accession Agreement of 43rd Cycle, one Princess Sailvor Kethis, third daughter of the Kethis Sovereign House, and, for reasons the briefing document described as legally significant, effectively unable to return home. The reason was the resonance rite. I should explain what the rite is, because I didn't understand it when I arrived, and I'm not sure I fully understood it even when the scanner activated and everything went sideways. The Kethis are an old empire, not ancient in the way that means they wear ceremonial armor and speak in formal cadences, though they do both, but old in the way that means their law has had centuries to develop into something so precisely layered that a human reading it feels the same vertigo they might feel peering down a very long staircase. Every provision connects to 3 others. Every clause has a shadow clause written into the appendices of a treaty 50 cycles past. The resonance rite was the Kethis method of formal betrothal. Not marriage, betrothal. The distinction mattered enormously to them. A marriage was a contract. A resonance match was a biological and legal confirmation. A machine built by the Kethis over centuries of calibration that reads something in the pairing of 2 individuals. Physiological signatures, neural harmonic patterns, things I lacked the biology training to fully parse, and either activated or didn't. If the scanner activated, the Kethis treaty with the compact required the match to be honored. If it didn't activate, the pair was legally incompatible, and the process ended. Sail had undergone the rite 3 times, with 3 candidates her family had selected, all Kethis, all of appropriate standing, all presumably excellent matches by every measure her court used. The scanner had not activated, not a flicker. The technical officer had checked the machine each time, confirmed it was functioning, and returned the same verdict. No match found. In Kethis law, this did not mean Sail was unfortunate. It meant she was legally unmarriageable under the treaty provisions, which meant she could not inherit the seat she was 3rd in line for, which meant, and this was the part where the legal staircase really did go, very deep. She was a political liability to her house if she remained at court, where her unmarriageable status could be invoked by any rival house seeking to challenge the succession. So she had been sent here. Thornwall Pass, a garrison on a Mountain World 3 relay jumps from the nearest significant compact station where the wind cut in off the high peaks every morning and smelled like iron, and where nobody was going to invoke anything. The garrison commander, a Kethis officer named Vareth Sul, a compact man with the pale gray skin of the Kethis lowland families and the permanent expression of someone doing a job that was professionally adequate but personally galling, met me at the arrival platform and gave me the briefing himself. He was thorough. He was also very clearly trying to communicate, through professional language, that the princess was not a problem, that I should not make her into a problem, and that the best way to handle the situation was to do exactly what all the other liaison postings had done. Treat her as a legal technicality with rooms, perform my duties toward the garrison, and make no mention of the rite. The machine is in storage, he said. It's not operational. There's no occasion for it to be operational. Your role here is the standard liaison brief, weekly status reports to the Compact Frontier Office, communication relay support during the winter transit window, and general integration with garrison security. You'll be assigned the East Dormitory block. The princess has the tower suite. Your paths will not cross frequently." I thanked him. I took my kit to the East Dormitory block. I looked out the narrow window at the mountain pass below, at the pale stone of the switchback road, cutting down through the gray-green scrub, at the sky above the peaks, which was the particular shade of deep blue-violet that high-altitude worlds tend to have. And I thought, this is going to be quiet. I was right, for about 3 weeks. The garrison was not large. 42 Keithis soldiers, a technical staff of 8, Varath Sul, a medical officer named Dithvaran, who was young for his rank and perpetually cold, and me. The human liaison post had existed for 11 years. Before me there had been 3 other humans in the role, all of whom had completed their posting without incident and transferred out at the end of the standard 2-year term. I found their logs in the relay archive. They were, as briefing documents go, models of completeness. They recorded equipment checks, communication relays, weather events, personnel transfers. Not one of them mentioned the princess except in the mandatory status of protected persons section of each quarterly report, where the entry read each time, in precisely the same language. Protected person, Vor Kethis S, present, stable, no change in status. I wrote the same thing in my first report. It was accurate. What I did not write was that I had met her on my 4th day, in the garrison's lower reading room, which was where the legal and historical archives were housed on a bank of storage units along the south wall, and where she was sitting at the long table, with 3 text slates and a cup of something dark and warm that smelled faintly like bark, reading with the specific, focused stillness of someone who had been doing this for a long time and preferred it to most other things. I had come to find the garrison maintenance logs. She was between me and the storage unit. I said, "Excuse me," which in compact standard, she spoke it fluently, with a slight formal precision that suggested she'd learned it from legal documents rather than conversation, came out with the particular flat effect of a man who has spent 14 months alone in an observation post and is still recalibrating for proximity to other beings. She looked up, gold-flecked dark eyes, the color of deep wood at the edge of firelight, pale ash-copper skin, close-cropped dark hair with a single rest-knitted braid that fell over one shoulder. She was not looking at me with any particular expression. She was simply looking, the way you look at something that has entered your space and you are dismissed whether it requires attention. "You're the new liaison," she said. "Yes, Tomas Vael." Dethvaran said a human had arrived. She looked back at her slate. "You'll want the maintenance logs. They're on the 3rd unit from the left, 2nd shelf." I found them. I took them. I did not say anything further, and neither did she. And I went back to the East Dormitory block and wrote my maintenance report and thought, she seems fine. She was, as far as I could tell, more than fine. She was also, as far as I could tell, essentially alone in a way that the garrison had decided was not its responsibility to address. Not unkindly alone. Varath Sul was correct in his duties. Dethvaran was professionally attentive. The garrison soldiers were not hostile. But there is a difference between the absence of hostility and the presence of recognition. And what I saw, in the weeks that followed, was a woman that the garrison had organized its behavior around in the same way that people organize their behavior around a piece of furniture they have agreed to respect but do not quite know what to do with. They spoke to her when spoken to. They did not exclude her from common spaces. They simply did not include. She ate in the common hall. She sat at the end of the long table, which had seating for 12 and usually held 6 or 7. And she had her meal and her text slate and her bark-smelling drink, and the garrison soldiers on her end of the table arranged themselves with a gap of 2 seats on either side of her that nobody had formally established but that had clearly been there long enough to become architecture. I sat down next to her on the 9th day, not out of any particular plan. The other end of the table was full, and I didn't think about it until after I was already settled, and by then moving would have been more pointed than staying. She looked at the 2-seat gap I had crossed. She looked at me. She said nothing. I ate my meal. After a while, she turned back to her slate. The next day, she had moved one seat further down, which put her closer to the center of the table. I don't know if that meant anything. I didn't ask. I sat next to her again. By the second week of this arrangement, which neither of us had discussed, Death Varen had started occasionally sitting across from her, and one of the garrison soldiers, a young woman named Tevra, who handled the communications relay and had a habit of bringing extra portions to whoever looked underfed, had begun including Sale in her informal portion distribution. Nobody said anything about any of it. It just happened, the way things happen in a small posting when there's nothing else to pay attention to. I noticed that Sale noticed. She was precise about things. She read the legal archives with the thoroughness of someone building an argument. And she thought before she spoke, and she registered information carefully, the way someone does when they've learned not to assume that anything good will simply continue without attention. The first time, Tevra set an extra portion of the evening ration in front of her without being asked, Sale's hands went very still for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you," in compact standard, formally, as if acknowledging a significant gesture at court. And Tevra said, "You always look like you're thinking too hard to remember to eat," and Sale, for just a moment, at the edges of her expression, almost smiled. I started addressing my questions to her directly. This sounds like nothing. It was not nothing. The standard dynamic in the garrison was that when Sale's name came up in any logistical context, when her reading room use affected the archive schedule, when her position in the tower suite needed to be noted in the security rotation, when anything involving the protected person clause required acknowledgement, Vareth Sul addressed it by speaking to me, or to Death Varen, or to the senior soldier on rotation, but not to her. Not dismissively, just procedurally. She was the subject of the discussion, not the participant. When I needed to know whether the south-facing reading room window was creating a security gap in the night rotation, it was a narrow one, but I was a frontier scout by training and narrow gaps kept me occupied. I went and asked her. She knew the building better than anyone. She'd been there 2 years. She told me about the window latch, about the gap in the outer wall patrol timing, about a maintenance quirk in the east side sensor array that nobody had logged because it only manifested in temperatures below -12 Celsius, which Thornwall Pass hit regularly from the 9th month onward. Vareth Sul, when I filed the resulting security amendment with the corrections included, looked at it with the expression of a man who has just discovered that an object he thought was a lamp has also been functioning as a structural support. He asked where I'd gotten the information about the sensor array. I told him. He said, "She's been here 2 years." "Yes," I said. He didn't say anything else. But the next morning at the common table, he sat down across from her, and he asked her about the sensor array himself. And the two of them spent 40 minutes talking through the maintenance backlog with the map slate between them, and she told him 6 other things he hadn't known. I'm not saying I fixed anything. A posting that lasts 2 more years, one that she'll leave when the compact's diplomatic clock runs out, and the legal liability has been absorbed into enough treaty renewals that her house can take her back without incident, is not a thing I was in a position to fix. I was there for 2 years. She was there because she had nowhere else to go. But I had noticed her. That was the thing I could do. And it turned out that being noticed, being spoken to directly, having your knowledge treated as knowledge rather than as background information that could be extracted by proxy, was not nothing to a woman who had spent 2 years as a diplomatic formality. On the 41st day, she came to find me. I was on the north wall doing the sunset rotation check, which was the least popular shift, because the wind off the high peaks at sunset hit the north parapet like a thrown thing, and the temperature dropped 6 degrees in 20 minutes. I had good kit for it. She arrived in what appeared to be a standard Kethis garrison coat that was not quite warm enough and had been tailored for someone with a different build. And she stood at the parapet and looked out at the mountain pass below, where the shadows were going long and dark along the switchback road. The Dravathi fleet filed an inspection request, she said. I knew about the Dravathi. They were in the briefing file, a separatist faction, Kethis political opponents of her family's sovereign house, who had been pushing against the Kethis Compact Treaty for 11 years on the grounds that the Kethis sovereign house had overstepped its authority in agreeing to the Compact's jurisdiction clauses. The legal argument was above my grade. What I knew was that they were not friendly. They had ships, and they had been registered as a treaty-adjacent concern in the Frontier Bureau files since before my first predecessor arrived. When, I said, Vareth Sul received the request this morning. He hasn't told you because he composing a response and trying to determine whether it requires escalation to the relay office. She looked at me sideways. I read the communications log. I have access. It's in my treaty provisions. I know, I said. I had read those provisions myself. He will tell you this evening, she said. I'm telling you now because I want you to understand what an inspection request from the Dravathi means. I looked at her. The wind was pushing her braid across her shoulder. She didn't move to correct it. Tell me, I said, she told me. Clearly, without editorial, in the same tone she used when she was working through a legal text. Not cold, just precise. The Dravathi inspection request was not about the garrison. It was about her. The Kethis Compact Treaty renewal window opened in 48 days. If sale remained legally unmarriageable at the renewal, if the resonance right clause still showed no match, then one of two things could happen. Either the seat succession in the Kethis sovereign house could be formally challenged on grounds of incomplete succession eligibility, which would destabilize her family's hold on the treaty relationship itself, or the Dravathi could invoke a subclause of the 43rd cycle agreement that allowed a contesting party to request sales return to Kethis, jurisdiction for re-evaluation. Neither outcome was good for her. The first would be a political catastrophe for her family. The second would return her to a court where, she said, with the same flat precision, I have made sufficient enemies in the years I have been absent that my physical safety is not guaranteed. I said, where's the machine? She looked at me. The scanner, I said. Vareth Sul said it was in storage. If the Dravathi get here and demand an inspection, they're going to want to see it. Where is it? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, sub-level storage, Bay 4. It's sealed under the garrison's equipment manifest. She paused. It's operational. They had it serviced in the 39th cycle. Good, I said. It won't activate, she said. I know that's what you think, I said. She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Not dismissive, not cold. Something more careful. The technical officers who ran the Rite 3 times are among the best calibration specialists in the Kethis system, she said. The machine isn't broken. I've read every technical assessment of every Rite conducted in the last 40 cycles. Some individuals simply do not produce a match. It's within normal parameters. I'm sure that's right, I said. You're not troubled by this. I didn't say that. You said good, she said, about the machine being operational, as if it matters. It matters because if the Dravathi demand an inspection and the machine is present and operational and doesn't activate, you have a legally documented event under oath and witness, and that's better than nothing, I said. And it matters because I'd rather know what we're dealing with before they arrive than after. She looked at me for another moment. Then she looked back at the mountain pass. The shadows had gone all the way down to the road now, and the road was dark, and only the very tops of the peaks were still lit. I came to tell you, she said, because when Vareth Sul brings this to you this evening, I would prefer you have context. Thank you, I said. She straightened her coat and went back inside. The wind hit the parapet, and I stood there in the cold for a while, and thought about the Dravathi, and the machine in Bay 4, and the 48-day window. Vareth Sul told me that evening. I listened, asked the questions I would have asked if I hadn't had context, and filed the escalation to the relay office that night. The relay office confirmed receipt and said a compact legal arbiter had been requested but would take 12 to 15 days to arrive. The Dravathi fleet, per their inspection filing, was 8 days out. We had a gap. Vareth Sul was not a man who lacked professional competence. He ran the garrison well. He read the tactical situation clearly. The Dravathi coming under the flag of inspection with intent that was legal on the surface and hostile underneath. And a 7-day window where we had to accommodate the inspection without triggering the treaty provisions that would make it worse. What he was less practiced at was the kind of asymmetric situation where the legal and the tactical were running on the same track, and I had spent enough time on the frontier, where the rules changed based on which jurisdiction's ship got there first, that the two-layer problem felt familiar. We spent 3 days planning. Sale was in those meetings. I put her there. I told Vareth Sul that she had the most complete working knowledge of the relevant treaty clauses of anyone at the garrison, which was true, and that excluding her from the strategic successions was the same as excluding the best intelligence source we had, which was also true. And Vareth Sul looked at me with the expression I was beginning to associate with him, adjusting his framework, and said, "She's been here 2 years. She really has," I said. She sat at the planning table and she worked. The picture that emerged from those 3 days was precise and not encouraging. The Dravathi had 9 ships. The garrison had fixed defensive installations and no fleet capacity. The relay office's promise of a compact arbiter was a timeline, not a guarantee, and the one procedural tool available to us, the resonance scanner, would produce, if activated under proper witness, a documented legal outcome. An outcome that remained, as Sale continued to note with calm consistency, a null result. On the 6th day, I went to sub-level storage bay 4. The scanner was large, larger than I'd expected, about the size of a ground vehicle, housed in a reinforced case with the Keithys technical insignia on the side and a date stamp from the servicing that confirmed Sale's information. The case opened on my garrison authorization, which I had because my liaison brief included access to all garrison inventory for reporting purposes. I did not activate the machine, I just looked at it. The control interface was in Keithys, which I read adequately, and the readout panel was a row of indicators that, according to the technical manual stored beside it, would produce one of 2 outputs: a null indicator, the machine reading no harmonic resonance between the presented individuals, or an activation sequence, which the manual described as a primary resonance confirmation tone, followed by a secondary cascade indicator across all harmonic registers, sustained for a minimum of 3 seconds. It had been producing the null indicator for 3 years. I read the technical manual. All of it. I am not a biologist, and I am not a Keithys legal specialist, but I have spent a significant portion of my professional life reading technical documentations about systems I am responsible for in the field, and I have learned that you do not need to understand the underlying science to understand the functional logic. The functional logic of the resonance scanner, as best I could parse it, was that it was measuring something that existed between 2 people, not an abstract compatibility, but something specific to the pair. And the calibration specialists had confirmed 3 times that whatever it was measuring between Sale and her, 3 Keithys candidates, it was not there. I stood in Bay 4 for a long time. Then I went back upstairs. On the 7th day, the Dravathi fleet arrived at the outer approach beacon and requested entry to Thornwall Pass garrison airspace. There were 9 of them, as the intelligence had said. The lead ship was a heavy diplomatic transport, sleek and dark, with the Dravathi faction insignia on the hull. They came in slow, procedurally correct, as an inspection party is required to do, and Vareth Sul met them on the landing platform with Sale at his right and me 2 steps behind, which was the correct formation for a garrison meeting a treaty-adjacent inspection. The garrison commander, the protected person, and the compact liaison as witness. Their lead representative was a tall Keithys man named Karan Vel. High-standing family markings, formal coat, the flat professional composure of someone who has done inspections before and is very clear about what he is actually there to accomplish. He greeted Vareth Sul with appropriate ceremony. He greeted Sale with the careful neutrality of someone who has been briefed to be neutral and is working at it. He greeted me by looking at me for slightly longer than was quite polite, taking in the human liaison guard, the compact insignia on my shoulder, and the specific nothing of my expression, and then looking away. "We appreciate the garrison's cooperation," he said, in compact standard, for my benefit, though the Dravathi spoke Kethis among themselves. "Our inspection covers the standard treaty station categories. We'll begin with the facilities review." What followed was 6 hours of procedural inspection. They were thorough. They documented everything. The facilities were in order. Vareth Sul ran a clean garrison, and each section check produced a notation and a confirmation, and Karanvel moved through it with the deliberate patience of someone building a record. By mid-afternoon they had reached the equipment inventory. He asked about the scanner. Vareth Sul confirmed it was present and operational, as the treaty required. Karanvel said that in the interest of completeness, and in view of the approaching treaty renewal window, his inspection mandate included a request to conduct a formal resonance Rite observation. This was, Sale had told me in our planning sessions, exactly what it would be. The Dravathi wanted a witnessed null result. A formally witnessed, properly documented, legally undeniable null result conducted under the inspection mandate, and therefore binding under the treaty's evidentiary clauses, which they could then attach to their challenge filing and submit before the renewal window opened. Vareth Sul looked at me. I said, "That's a valid request under the inspection mandate. We'll accommodate it." Karanvel looked at me. Something in his expression shifted slightly, not alarm, but recalculation. "As compact witness," I said, "I'll need to observe the procedure and certify the result. Standard protocol." "Of course," he said. We went to sublevel storage bay 4. The case was open when we got there. I had not resealed it, and the scanner stood in the center of the bay. Karanvel's technical officer, a woman who had the same competent professional manner as the lead representative, inspected the machine and confirmed its operational status. Sale stood to one side of the room, composed, watching the technical officer work, and said nothing. The Dravathi witnesses arranged themselves in the observation arc that the manual specified. 5 meters back, clear line of sight to the readout panel. I stood in the arc with them. The technical officer finished her check and said, in Kethis, that the machine was ready. Vareth Sul translated for me formally, because he was precise about his duties, even when precision was unnecessary. "Ready," I confirmed. Sale stepped forward to the scanner's entry platform. She stood very still. The machine took about 13 seconds to complete its scan cycle, during which the readout panel displayed a series of Kethis characters that the manual told me were the harmonic register calibration sequence. The null indicator appeared. Karanvel made a note. "The machine has confirmed," Sale said quietly, to no one in particular, what it has confirmed before. "As documented," Karanvel said. I stepped forward. Everyone in the room looked at me. "The standard resonance Rite procedure," I said, "requires confirmation of a null result through a complete candidate evaluation." I checked the manual. A null result from a single subject scan establishes the machine's baseline function. A null result from a paired scan establishes the legal finding. I looked at Karanvel. "A paired scan hasn't been run," Karanvel said in a very measured voice. "The compact liaison isn't a party to the Kethis resonance procedure. The compact liaison is the treaty witness," I said. "And the treaty's evidentiary clause requires that a witnessed null finding be drawn from a complete procedure. I can cite the relevant article if you'd like." I could. Cecil had made me memorize it. A very careful silence happened in the room. "A paired scan requires a candidate," Karanvel said. "Yes," I said. He looked at me. He looked at Sale. He looked back at me. "You're not a Kethis national," he said. The 43rd Cycle Agreement extended resonance Rite eligibility to any individual holding a valid Compact Treaty Station Liaison Commission, I said. Article 18, subsection 4. The provision was added to ensure that frontier postings with mixed nationality personnel could satisfy Rite requirements without requiring transport of Kethis nationals to remote stations. I paused. It's been in the treaty for 40 cycles. It's never been used because no human liaison has ever been posted at a station that also housed a subject of the Rite. Another silence. Longer this time. Sale was looking at me. Her expression was not the careful, neutral composure she had been wearing for the inspection. It was the expression she'd had on the north parapet when I'd said good about the scanner. Something more careful than the rest of her face. Assessing. "Run it," I said to the technical officer. Both of us paired scan. The technical officer looked at Coronvel. Coronvel said, "The result will be null. Then your inspection record will be complete and legally unimpeachable," I said, "and you'll have saved us all some paperwork." I looked at him. "Unless there's a reason you'd prefer not to have a complete procedure on record." He said nothing. I stepped up onto the entry platform beside Sale. She was very close. Close enough that I was aware of the particular bark and cold stone smell of the garrison coat she was wearing, and the steadiness of her breathing, and the way she was looking at the readout panel with the focused stillness of someone waiting for a result they already know. "It won't activate," she said very quietly, just to me. "I know that's what you think," I said. "3 times," she said. "I know," I said. The technical officer ran the paired scan. The calibration sequence ran across the readout panel. The same Kethis characters, the same 30-second cycle, the same pattern of indicators as that Sale had watched 3 times before in rooms much grander than this one. The scanner produced the primary resonance confirmation tone. It was loud. It was unmistakably, categorically loud, in the way that things are loud when they have not been heard before and are now being heard clearly. The secondary cascade followed it. All harmonic registers lighting across the panel, one after another, in a sequence that the manual described as sustained, and that was, under any reasonable interpretation, sustained. Nobody in the room said anything. The readout panel displayed a Kethis character that, per the manual, meant confirmed match. Coronvel looked at the panel. He looked at his technical officer. He looked at me and Sale on the platform, where the secondary cascade was still running, where it was still very clearly running, where it showed no immediate sign of stopping. "Malfunction," he said. "Noted," I said. "The machine requires recalibration," he said. "This result is procedurally invalid. Your technical officer just confirmed the machine's operational status," I said. "That's in your inspection record. You confirmed it 3 minutes ago in front of 6 witnesses." A very long silence. The cascade ran to completion. The readout panel held the confirmed match indicator for a moment, and then cleared to standby, as the manual said it would. I stepped off the platform. Sale did not move immediately. "This is a malfunction," Coronvel said again. His voice had not changed in register. The man had good professional discipline. "You can note your position in the inspection record," I said. "The result is what it is." He left the bay. His people followed. I could hear them on the stairs, moving quickly. I stayed in the bay. Sale was still standing on the platform. The readout panel had cleared to standby. The room was the room it had always been. Gray stone vaults, the machine in its reinforced case, the overhead light panels, the industrial smell of equipment that has been in storage. The only thing different about it was the silence, which was different from ordinary silence, because it had a particular quality. The quality of a silence that follows a sound that has never been heard before. I had spent 14 months alone in a forward observation post. I had spent 11 days on a north wall watching a fleet that was not going to fire. I was not, generally, a person who needed a great deal of time to process new information. The new information here was that the machine, which had produced a null result 3 times with 3 Kethis candidates, had just produced a confirmed match the first time I stood next to her on the platform. That was the information. I had looked for the article because it seemed like it might be relevant. I had not been certain the cascade would run. I was, if I'm being honest with myself, more surprised than I had let anyone see. Not alarmed, but surprised. I said, "Are you all right?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped off the platform, and she turned. and she looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not in 41 days, not on the north parapet, not over the common table, not in 3 days of planning sessions. The expression of someone who has received information that requires recalibrating everything they thought they knew about the room they're standing in. "You read the manual," she said. "All of it," I said. "Article 18, subsection 4. "I looked for it specifically," I said. "After the parapet. I thought it might be in there," she said. "I wrote my own legal analysis of the treaty provisions 4 months ago. I didn't find that article." "You were looking for articles that applied to your situation," I said. "I was looking for articles that applied to mine." She looked at me for a long time. "It will need to be run again," she said finally, "under proper oath and witness, with the arbiter present. This result will be challenged. You know that." "Yes," I said. "You'll still be here when the arbiter arrives." 11 days out. "At the relay estimate," I said. "The Dravathi will attempt to leave before then," she said. "They have no basis to hold their result as incomplete. If you're still a valid candidate on record, they'll want to file before the arbiter arrives and contest their position." "I know," I said. "They have 9 ships," she said. "I know that too," I said. She looked at me with a careful assessing expression. "What are you planning to do?" she said. "Hold the garrison," I said. "Keep the north wall." "Wait for the arbiter," she said. "I should tell you that I don't. I have not been prepared to." She stopped, started again. "I came here because there was nowhere else. I've understood this posting as a place where the situation stabilizes, not improves. I have not been hoping for an outcome." "I know," I said. "You don't seem particularly put out by that," she said. "I've spent a lot of time in forward positions," I said. "The situation either resolves or it doesn't. You do your job and you hold your ground. The hoping doesn't add much. And yet you looked for Article 18, subsection 4. "Well," I said, "I'm a frontier scout by training. I was going to look at every angle." She was still looking at me. After a moment, something in her expression settled into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. The same thing I had seen at the common table, that first time Tevra had pushed a portion toward her, but less guarded now, and aimed at me. "I believe," she said carefully, "that when the Dravathi discovered the article being invoked, their initial plan stopped being viable." "I believe so too," I said. "They'll try a different approach." "Yes," I said. "We should probably go tell Vareth Sul." We went upstairs. Vareth Sul had already arrived at the same conclusion via his own route, and the next 4 hours were spent watching the Dravathi fleet move from diplomatic inspection orbit to something that was not, technically, a siege, but was also not a siege. They positioned 3 ships on the approach vector to the garrison landing platform and filed a notation claiming equipment malfunction contestation and a request to hold the result pending re-inspection with Dravathi technical staff. Vareth Sul filed a counterclaim. I filed the compact liaison's formal certification of the result and a request for immediate arbiter deployment, flagged as treaty critical. The Dravathi fleet moved their remaining 6 ships to cover the mountain pass below. "They're not going to fire on a garrison," Sales said. We were in the operations room, the 3 of us, with the tactical map lit on the table. "Not directly. The diplomatic consequences would unravel everything they've spent 11 cycles building." "They don't need to fire on the garrison," I said. "They need to hold us here until they can find a procedural angle to void the result. The machine malfunction claim is thin, and they know it. But if they can delay the arbiter and run out the clock on the renewal window, they have options." I looked at the map. "How long until the window closes?" 44 days, Sales said. "The arbiter is 11 days out," Vareth Sul said. "So we need to hold for 11 days, I said. "The garrison is equipped for extended defensive operation," Vareth Sul said. "We can hold for significantly longer than 11 days under standard siege conditions. The issue is that a Dravathi ground operation on Velkarith would invoke compact territorial protocols, which they don't want," Sales said. "If they trigger territorial protocols, the compact sends a fleet response. That ends any remaining legal argument they have. So they can't land troops, I said. Correct, she said. Then we're not being held under threat of assault, I said. We're being stared at. I looked at Vareth Sul. We can do 11 days of being stared at. Vareth Sul almost smiled. It was the first time I had seen him almost smile in 6 weeks. We did the 11 days. It was not exciting in any conventional sense. The Dravathi fleet held position. They filed 4 more procedural challenges through the relay network, each of which required a formal response that Sayel drafted and I certified and Vareth Sul transmitted. On the 3rd day, they tried a technical probe, a drone survey of the garrison's perimeter, ostensibly for the inspection record. And I ran the North Wall protocol I had designed around the sensor array gaps Sayel had told me about, which caught the probe before it reached the inner perimeter, and which Vareth Sul logged as a perimeter security event under the garrison's standard. Defensive authority. Coranvel filed a protest. I noted the probe in my compact liaison report and attached a copy of the perimeter security log. The protest sat in the relay queue. What I remember from those 11 days is not the Dravathi fleet specifically. 9 ships in holding orbit become background information after about 18 hours, the same way weather becomes background information when you've been on the frontier long enough. A condition, not an event. What I remember is the garrison under the weight of it. Small things. Tevra running the communications relay for 16-hour stretches and emerging. At the end of each, with the careful composure of someone who has been listening to a frequency they don't want to hear anything on. And then sitting at the common table and eating her meal with the particular deliberateness of a person who is reminding themselves that normal things still occur. Death Varan checking the medical bay inventory twice a day. Not because anything required it, but because having a task with a correct answer at the end was better than sitting with a task that didn't. Vareth Sul making his garrison rounds with a precision that had always been professional and was now also something close to devotional. Touching each checkpoint, confirming each post, not because he expected anything to change, but because the doing of it was the thing that held. I understood all of it. 14 months in a forward observation post teaches you what people do with sustained uncertainty when they can't make it. Stop. You develop rituals. You maintain the things you can maintain. You keep the North Wall. Sayel and I fell into a rhythm. The legal responses required her knowledge and my certification. So we worked on them together at the planning table. And after the first 2 days, the working together stopped feeling procedural and started feeling like what it was. 2 people in a small garrison on a mountain world, in a situation that was genuinely not resolved yet, doing the work that was available to them. She would draft the response language in Kethis legal form, read it to me for translation clarity, and I would suggest adjustments for how it would land in compact standard, and she would consider the adjustments with the same careful precision she applied to everything. And occasionally she would say, "That's better." And occasionally she would say, "That changes the implication of the 3rd clause." And occasionally she would look at me with the expression I was coming to know as her particular version of exasperation. Patient, not unkind. And explain she watched with the thoroughness of someone who does not expect to be understood, but is trying anyway. The 5th day, during a pause in the drafting, she asked me about Velmora. I had mentioned it once in passing. The forward observation post, 14 months. She wanted to know what it was like. I told her, cold, mostly. High desert terrain, good sight lines, a supply drop every 6 weeks that was reliable, in the same way that mountain weather is reliable. Mostly. 14 months of watching a particular transit corridor for anomalous traffic patterns. I had flagged 11 events. 8 had turned out to be routine navigation deviations. 3 had been what they looked like. The write-up on those 3 had gotten me the commendations and the reassignment request that had eventually produced the Thornwall posting. She listened. She asked about the terrain, the equipment, the isolation. Not in the way people sometimes ask about isolation, with the undercurrent of wondering whether it had done something to me. But the way someone asks, who is trying to understand the shape of a thing? "I've been here 2 years, she said when I had finished. "I don't think of it the same way you describe Velmora." "You weren't alone," I said. "The garrison was here." "The garrison was here," she agreed. Not bitterly, just precisely. "It's different," I said. "Is it better or worse?" she said. I thought about it. "Both," I said, "depending on the day." She looked at that for a moment. Then she looked back at the draft on her slate. And the conversation folded back into the work, the way conversations do in small spaces when there is still work to do. On the 7th day, one of the Dravathi ships left the formation and moved to the outer approach beacon. Sale tracked it through the garrison communications system. "They're burning for the relay junction," she said. "They're going to meet the arbiter." "Can they legally delay him?" I said. "They can file a request for preliminary review of the inspection contestation," she said. "The arbiter has discretion to hold at the junction and review materials before proceeding." She paused. "If the materials support a preliminary determination that the result is contested on valid technical grounds, he can request additional documentation before entering the station's jurisdiction." I said. "How solid is the technical malfunction argument?" "Thin," she said. "The operational confirmation from their own technical officer is on record. A competent arbiter will not give it much weight." "But it's 4 days of delay," I said. "Potentially," she said. "Then we hold 4 more days if we need to," I said. She looked at me. We were in the reading room. It was late, the kind of late where the garrison had gone to sleep, and there was nobody else in the room, and the wind off the peaks was audible through the walls in a low, steady way that had become familiar. She had 3 text slates on the table in front of her. The same picture as the first day I had seen her, but the material on the slates was different now. Treaty clauses, not historical archives. "You don't worry," she said. "I do," I said. "I just don't do it loudly." She looked at the slates. "I've spent 2 years," she said, "reading the archives because it was something to do with certainty. There were no other certainties available. The legal situation was what it was. My house's position was what it was. I came here because the alternative was remaining at a court where my presence was a problem. And I stayed here because," she paused, "because there was nowhere else." "And now," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "There are things here," she said carefully, "that were not present when I arrived." She looked up at me. "I'm aware that this situation, the scanner, the article you found, the legal outcome. I'm aware that I haven't asked you what you want from this. I've been treating it as a tactical problem." "That's all right," I said. "I've also been treating it as a tactical problem." "That's not the only thing it is," she said. "No," I said. She looked at me steadily. Gold-flecked dark eyes, in the low light of the reading room, with the wind off the peaks, making the kind of sound that big empty places make at night when the world has reduced to the room you're in. "I don't know what she started. Then she stopped. Then she said, precisely, "I am not practiced at this. I have been told for 3 years that I am not eligible for it. I have organized myself accordingly." "I know," I said. "You seem comfortable," she said, "with a great deal of uncertainty." "Frontier service," I said. "You get used to it." "I've been a legal technicality for 2 years," she said. "I'm not sure I know how to be something else." "You've been a lot of things for 2 years that you probably don't have a full accounting of yet," I said. "The sensor array. The maintenance log. The article in the treaty that you didn't find because you weren't looking for an angle on your own behalf." I looked at her. "You're the best intelligence resource this garrison has. You're the reason the security rotation works. You've been doing the work of someone who was invested in this place for a long time." She said, "I noticed that the garrison needed things." "Yes," I said. "It didn't seem like enough to count." "It's always enough to count," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked down at the treaty text on her slate. I could see the specific lines she'd been working through. The recognition clauses, the match confirmation protocol, the section on what happened after the arbiter certified a result. "If it holds," she said quietly, What happens after is. She let the sentence sit. I've read the clauses many times tonight. I know what they say, I said. You're not alarmed, she said. Not quite a question. I found the article, I said. I stepped on the platform. I knew what the clauses said before I did either of those things. She looked at me with the careful, assessing expression, and then something in it shifted. Opened a little. Not into anything demonstrative. Just the particular quality that a person's expression takes on when they have decided to extend a trust they have been protecting for a long time. All right, she said. All right, I said. The arbiter arrived on day 13. His name was Seth Mora, an older Kethis man, compact and unhurried, with the professional composure of someone who has seen many inspection contestations and sorted out most of them before lunch. He came directly to the garrison, overruled the Dravathi preliminary review request with a 2-sentence notation, and reviewed the inspection record, the scanner documentation, my liaison certification, and Karanvel's malfunction claim in approximately 4 hours. On the morning of day 14, Seth Mora called the formal review session in the garrison's main hall, the largest interior space, which could hold all 42 soldiers plus the Dravathi delegation, plus the station personnel, and which did so, everyone standing in a room that smelled like stone and cold air, and the faint industrial smell of garrison equipment. Karanvel presented the malfunction claim. Sale had been right. It was thin, and Seth Mora received it, with the polite attentiveness of a man who has been told a thing that does not change the outcome. My certification was on record. The scanner's operational confirmation from the Dravathi Zone Technical Officer was on record. The Article 18, Subsection 4 eligibility provision was on record. The cascade result, documented by the machine's internal log and witnessed by 9 people, was on record. Seth Mora ran the scanner a second time. Complete procedure, oath and witness, Karanvel and his delegation standing in the observation arc. The primary resonance confirmation tone sounded in the hall. The secondary cascade ran all registers. Karanvel said, "Malfunction." Nobody else in the room said anything. Vareth Sul was looking at the readout panel with an expression I did not have a word for. Tevra, standing against the wall with the other garrison soldiers, had her hand pressed to her mouth. Death Varen was looking at his own hands, very still. The Dravathi delegation were looking at the panel and at their own feet and at the ceiling and at each other with the specific expressions of people who have lost and know it and are deciding how to absorb the information. Seth Mora looked at the panel. He looked at his documentation. He made 3 notes on his record slate. Then he looked at Sale. "Princess Vor Kethis," he said, in formal Kethis, which Vareth Sul translated for me in a low voice at my shoulder. "The Resonance Rite has produced a confirmed match under full treaty witness and arbiter certification. Under the provisions of the Kethis Compact Accession Agreement, 43rd cycle, you are invited to confirm or contest the result." The room was very quiet. Not the quiet of a place where nothing is happening, the quiet of a place where everything has been suspended while one thing happens. Sale stood very still for a moment. She was looking at the readout panel, where the confirmed match indicator was holding. Then she looked at me. I looked at her. She had told me she was not practiced at this. She had told me she had organized herself around a different set of certainties. She had told me, quietly, in the reading room, that she did not know how to be something other than a legal technicality. I had not had an answer for that, not a clean one, because clean answers are for people who are not standing in the middle of a situation that is still resolving. What I had told her was that a frontier scout holds ground, that the hoping doesn't add much, that you wait for the situation to resolve and you do your job and you keep your eyes on the north wall. She had been watching me keep my eyes on the north wall for 13 days. "Thomas Vale," she said, not loudly, but in a room that quiet. She did not need to be loud. I confirmed the result. Seth Mora made his notation. Karanvel said nothing. Sale turned to face the room. She had the particular composed stillness she had always had. But it was different now. Not the stillness of someone containing a position. but the stillness of someone who has arrived somewhere. The way I had seen it once before, on the north parapet, looking at the pass going dark below. Seth Mora said, in compact standard for my benefit, because he was also precise about his duties. Under the treaty provisions, the match is recorded and the confirmation stands. The Drothi contestation is dismissed. The treaty renewal will proceed on the standard schedule. He paused. Congratulations to the matched parties. Coronvel left the hall first. His delegation followed. The Drothi fleet, per the relay records, broke orbit and burned for the jump point within 3 hours. The hall was not immediately loud after they left. It had been a formal session, and the garrison maintained appropriate decorum. But Tevra had stopped pressing her hand to her mouth and was looking at me with an expression that I filed under. Human reactions to things going unexpectedly well. Death Varen was shaking hands with the soldier next to him. Vareth Sul came to stand beside me, and he said, in a quiet voice, Article 18, subsection 4. I read the manual, I said. He said, I've been here 4 years. I didn't read the manual. You had a garrison to run, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she's going to go home. Yes, I said. When the paperwork processes, the legal liability against the succession is cleared. The house can take her back. He paused. That's a good outcome. Yes, I said. You'll still have a posting to complete, he said. Elesensice, I said. The Frontier Bureau's standard term. He nodded. He was looking at the hall, where the garrisons and soldiers were beginning to move, beginning to talk, beginning to do the things that people do when something has shifted and the new configuration hasn't fully settled yet. She won't need to stay, he said, once the paperwork processes. I know, I said. That doesn't concern you. I looked at Sail across the room, where Tevra had found her and was saying something to her, and she was listening with the careful, almost smile quality, the expression I had first seen at the common table. She looked up and met my eyes. She confirmed the result, I said. Not because the law compels her. The treaty clause gives her the option to contest. She confirmed it herself. Vareth Sul said nothing. That's what I have, I said. That's enough to work with. I crossed the room to where she was. Tevra made a tactful departure, which she managed with the same warmth she managed everything. The hall was thinning around us. Seth Mora was speaking with the garrison's legal staff at one end of the room. The wind off the peaks was audible through the walls. Sail looked at me. The gold-flecked dark eyes, the expression she had been building toward since the reading room, since the north parapet, since the first common table morning, since she had looked up from her text slates in the archive room and said, with the flat precision of someone who has been keeping careful track of all available information, "You'll want the maintenance logs. They're on the 3rd unit from the left. The paperwork will take approximately 3 weeks, she said. The relay office is efficient, I agreed. I will need to go home, she said. The situation with the succession, the court dynamics, the work of returning. It won't be simple. No, I said. 11 months is not a long time, she said. It's not short either, I said. She considered that. She had the habit, I had noticed, of considering things fully before she said them, of taking the time to assemble what she actually meant, rather than producing an approximate version. I had come to find the pauses useful. They meant she was about to say something real. I noted, she said carefully, some months ago, that you had a habit of addressing things directly. Frontier service, I said. And I noted, she said, that you appeared to find me useful. Among other things, I said. And I noted, she said, the smallest pause, that you looked for Article 18, subsection 4. Yes, I said. Those are, she said, the things I have. A pause. They seem like enough to work with, I said. Yes, they do. Outside, the Drothi fleet was gone. The mountain pass below Thornwall was clear, the switchback road visible again in the afternoon light, the shadows not yet long. The wind off the peaks came through at its usual angle, and the garrison around us was settling into the particular rhythm of a place that has done something difficult and is returning to itself. She didn't say anything else. Neither did I. There wasn't much more that needed to be said. We stood there for a while in the clearing hall, and let it be what it was.